Rogers, a ton of stuff, Cocoon, E.T. So, you saw a lot of common themes as far as design. And like I think I was telling you earlier, the Viper, which we all know and love, the original was one of his first designs was what eventually became Buck Rogers' Starfighter.
Right.
They were actually thinking of using that as the Viper, and then they came out with the other design, which is better.
Yeah, they kept it. They kept it within the family with that. No, it's so true. And you know what? I just want to give a shout out. Some comments coming in, some people that are tuning in. I just want to say hi to Rob Barnes. Hey, Rob, how's it going? Dave Bolter. Hey, Dave, out there. And Joe. And Joe Brickman, my friend from grade school, is out there. Hey, Joe, I want to say hello to you. And thanks for everybody for joining. My son Ryan is actually on, and my friend Vince Foti. Thanks for joining, everybody. We really appreciate it. And thanks for taking this time to go down memory lane as we talk about Battlestar Galactica. And Mike and I were talking about this too. I have not yet said Star Trek until now.
There you go. There it is.
Just wanted to get that out of my system.
If you want to, and again, that era is what sparked, Paramount to switch Star Trek from going from a television show, from reissuing his New Voyage, Star Trek New Voyages, to the film that we know now as Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Right.
That was all because of Star Wars.
Yep.
And even in my personal, I grew up watching Star Trek and Lost in Space on, in the afternoons after school. It was on, as you know, I was probably watching the same New York stations you were, living in Southern Connecticut. And, we watched, and that's how I got kind of started on science fiction. But it really wasn't until Star Wars was shown, and it just blew my mind as a movie that got me back really into the science fiction and space kind of thing more than anything. And so when he heard about Battlestar Galactica coming out, I'm like, I'm watching this show. I don't care what it's about. It looks like Star Wars. So, anything that could feed that addiction was gonna, and it was a good show. It really actually wasn't a bad show if you actually watch the episodes and kind of take out that 70s a little bit of campiness that those shows seem to have. It really wasn't. It was pretty well written, and the idea was a good concept.
Right.
So I think that's why it held the test of time, and they were able to reboot it in 2004, and it was successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the only thing that killed it in '78 was the cost of it. It wasn't so much the ratings; it was we can't.
I mean, the fact that they had a totally functional bridge. I mean, where any computer monitor or any screen that you went to on that bridge, I mean, it worked, but it wasn't a necessity for that. So if you're budgeting a show as elaborate as that. It's amazing that how much money went into it, but it was definitely, I think the stories were really, were very well done, very well written. I mean, there were a few episodes, that, there was some, I'd say maybe one or two that were not favorites of mine. And then there were some that I, liked less than others. But, we'll discuss that tonight as we go on in our conversation. But sure. I think that, Battlestar definitely resonates, and it's definitely a part of our sci-fi history of the 70s. I mean, for myself, you were talking about how with you starting with sci-fi. I mean, for me, it was classic Star Trek. It was Lost in Space. Those were my interests, and then it just kind of went from there. And then, obviously, Space 1999, which was huge for me in 1975 when that premiered. I mean, that's one of my all-time favorite shows, right up there with classic Star Trek. And Galactica, followed in '78. With Buck Rogers in '79, it makes you wonder what would have happened, with science fiction television or even science fiction movies if Star Wars had not been filmed, because it really laid the groundwork of what was going to become in the later part of 1970s as well as into the 80s. It really just changed everything as far as we know it.
It is, like I said, I look at it as kind of that second Renaissance or first Renaissance. I always talk about Forbidden Planet as kind of the grandfather of modern science fiction, because we've seen so many things that we automatically equate with science fiction came out of that movie. Certainly Star Trek had a ton of Forbidden Planet in it. But then, I think Star Wars was that next, people talk about 2001, but really as science fiction-y as that is, that didn't have the impact as far as on the overall genre as the Star Wars did.
No, I would agree with that.
Star Wars reached everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, for it was across such a large population, from kids to adults. You know, it wasn't just kids movie. It wasn't just an adult movie. You know, it reached so many people. It was just so many. It was so broad that it really was, as a kid, that was a life-changing film. I mean, it really.
Oh, absolutely.
Came out of that film blown away.
It's funny that you're mentioning.
So like I said, you go to Battlestar. Yeah, you know, I love Battlestar because it was, to me, it was like an extension of Star Wars.
Yeah, it really was. And it's funny you're mentioning about 2001: A Space Odyssey, because you know, referring to my friend Joe Metz back, you know, when we first met and we moved out here in 1976, the movie that he had talked about a lot prior to Star Wars was 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I remember they showed it, and it was on, you know, regular television, and it was, you know, at that time it was not something that really I enjoyed. I mean, now as a movie, you know, you have to be. It's very deep and very complex. And Joe was that type of individual, you know, back from, you know, when we were kids. I mean, very intellectual, and had an appreciation of, you know, the arts as well as, you know, a story of that depth. And I'll be honest with you, for myself, I tried to enjoy it on that level, but it just wasn't something that I appreciated that I can appreciate more now, you know, as an adult. But a lot of times, you know, references were made, you know, to that movie. I mean, the special effects especially. And it was, you know, there was a lot of symbolism and a lot of metaphors and what have you. But Star Wars was the action movie of 1977 that just capulated everything. And I realize we're kind of, you know, sidelining here, everybody. We're talking about Battlestar Galactica, but Star Wars definitely had a huge impact on Galactica, which is the reason why
you can't talk about Battlestar without talking about Star Wars.
Exactly. They go, you know, almost hand in hand. But,
so I could talk about Star Wars for hours, of course, but we won't do that.
Yeah, and I could too, and maybe we'll do that. I mean, with this show, we're covering, you know, science fiction television shows of the 60s and 70s, but I think down the road I will do a special edition, because to keep Star Wars out of it just doesn't seem right, and we will definitely come back and revisit that, because that's something that cannot be passed upon.
Yeah, we were going to cover it on my show as well, because, you know, their subsequent movies were, of course, in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe we can combine things.
Yeah.
But
that'd be excellent.
But getting back to the other thing, a lot of little things I loved about Battlestar. I loved the uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
The design of the warrior uniforms was great. It was unique. Yet it just, and it still, to me, it still holds the test of time. I think you could see those uniforms in a show today. You know, and I think you wouldn't, maybe not the helmets that look like Biggie
right.
Pharaoh heads or whatever they were, but I think you know, the rest of the uniforms I think would work. I mean, they really were, you know, they just look cool.
Yeah, they definitely.
I wanted one as a kid. I still want one.
Yeah, they were definitely very sleek, and they you know, if you were a colonial warrior, you know what, you looked like you were pretty sharp, and, you know, deemed a lot of respect. And no, I definitely agree with that. My recollection, though, of that first movie, though, was incredible with the special effects and everything. And, when the Atlantic, the first Battlestar goes that we see, I mean, when, you know, it's being attacked and it's, you know, and then the president is left there, you know, when Baltar just leaves him there, and you felt, you knew what was going to come, because he was just like, you know, setting him up for the big blow. And then, you know, Adam is trying to convince him, you know, to, you know what, you got to go to offensive positions, and he just wouldn't listen. Right. He's like, it's about peace. And then what happens is it just gets pulverized.
It was frustrating.
It was
frustrating to watch.
It really was.
You knew what was going to happen, and you know, but yeah, and you know, the funny thing is that you kind of saw that repeat throughout even the first 3 episodes, where they were going to try, you know, the other guy comes in and he's like, oh yeah, we're going to dismantle. It was like the second episode where they're on the Carillon, and you know, we're going to dismantle our war machine so that they'll see that we're not a threat and go away. I mean, I'm like, really, who really thinks that that's going to happen?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Of course, Adama says, no, you know, fool me, you know, the old Scotty thing, you know, fool me once.
Shame on you.
Yep.
David's jumping in. Dave Bolter. The uniforms were intended to mimic the attention to the King Tut exhibition touring the country at the time. Oh, that's an interesting.
Yeah,
bit of information.
You wonder if he's referring to the helmet? Certainly had an Egyptian. I don't know about the uniform per se.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see anything necessarily Egyptian about the uniform part, but the flight helmet.
The flight helmet, definitely.
Because it had that kind of. They even had the little, the. You couldn't see the actor's face. So it's always funny. They did it with the Abyss too. They had these lights, and I'm like, why would you want these lights inside your helmet? You wouldn't be able to see anything outside.
Exactly. Really, it doesn't help. Really, it's a dramatic purpose just to make it shine. You know what?
Didn't have any kind of shield though. It was open. I'm like, well, what was the good of the helmet? I guess if the cockpit was compromised, they had no shield to keep the air into their.
Nope, we are back. We are back live, everybody. I'm not sure exactly what happened. We had a malfunction, but we are back here, and we are talking about Battlestar Galactica. And Dave is also commenting where the camera crew went to Egypt to film the pyramids. That's true because I believe that they did for that episode Lost Planet of the Gods, Part 1 and Part 2. I believe that they actually did go to Egypt to film that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool.
Like it, and then of course there was some studio portions when they were inside.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
itself.
One thing that was tragic is that I think they really wanted Jane Seymour's character Serena to continue on the series, but unfortunately she did not want to be committed to a series, and that was why her character was killed off, and that was painful to watch. That was a very sad part of that episode.
I still hold the torch for that woman.
Yeah, she was wonderful in that part.
She was one of my favorites of that era, and still is. She's still a beautiful woman, even at her old age. So it would have been nice to see her continue on that show.
Yeah.
But that's the way Hollywood goes. They get other jobs, and she did more film. And that's where she started, as we were talking about earlier. She started as James Bond, I think, as a Bond girl.
Yeah, she was Solitaire.
Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die. Yep.
So then, in fact, I think it even says, if I remember in the credits of that film, I think it even says introducing James Seymour. I believe it's kind of.
It probably did. I think.
I won't swear to that, but I think so. Maybe somebody remembers. But that was really she was really young when she did that.
She was only like 23 years old when she did that film.
Because that was about 73.
73. It was 1973. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking Battlestar was 5 years later. So So I think I want to say she was 18 when she did the Bond movie. 18 or 19. She was pretty young. Yeah,
no, she was. I think, actually, thinking about it, I think she was like 26 or 27 when she did Battlestar. So, yeah, she probably was 21, 22.
Maybe
she was very young. Remember the episode, The Lost Warrior, the one where Apollo gets... he crashes on that planet, and he's pretty much in isolation, and... what happens is he befriends a woman, a widow, and her husband was a colonial warrior. And Apollo is very fearful to expose that he's a colonial warrior, especially when he finds out that there was a Cylon in the town. And to me, that was kind of a cool episode. And, it dealt with, relationship to, I believe the character's name was Puppis.
It was almost like a Western.
Yes, it was. Interesting enough, the in that episode, Lance Legault, who played the woman's brother, would appear in Battlestar Galactica and in later episodes. He was part of the Noman clan. They were they were like that race that they had the code and they talked, like that. It was like they were like almost flatliners when they talked.
They would like explosive bolas or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was. I thought that was good and interesting enough too. One of his, I think his henchmen that was in that.
Interesting, and I loved in that episode the way they basically made the Cylon was just kind of like the town thug.
Yep.
You know, he was like it's kind of the bad the what's the word? I'm like.
The town bully.
It was like a western. Like,
yeah.
He was the outlaw that was running the town. It basically was just the muscle for the guy that was
exactly.
Town, if I remember
and they tried to take him out with a regular gun, and it wouldn't work. But they knew that his Colonial Blaster would actually work on him.
Right.
The guy's henchman before the Cylon took over, who was deemed as being Red Eye, was Red West. Believe it or not, and I had read Red West. I believe. Elvis Presley's, I believe, his bodyguards, if I'm not mistaken. And also, he was part of the troupe that was used in as a stunt guy, as well as a regular as a part of the ensemble in the Wild Wild West. They'd always have the same background characters, and he was one of them. Yeah, kind of interesting.
Well, you know, and again, we saw as we see in the '60s and in the '70s too. You'd see a lot of studios would have their actors.
Yep.
That they would always pull from. So you'd see a lot of the same people over and over again in different roles, different shows, either as guest stars or whatever. So that was so common of that era. You don't see that as much anymore.
No.
Because there's not we don't have the big studios so much. Everybody's kind of independent, and networks are just buying the stuff. From other people.
Especially with Universal, too, because Universal had their contract players, and Lance Legault, was talking about him being in a later episode of Battlestar, but he was also on with the Fate. He was the show with I'm drawing a blank now with the title. That's pretty bad. With Faceman and George. It was in the 1980s. The A-Team. I knew it would come to me eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, we have to talk about this a little bit of Star Trek. There was definitely some Star Trek connections there with John Colicos. Is that how you pronounce his name?
John Colicos?
Who was Core from Errand of Mercy, as Baltar. He had pretty much I wouldn't say a leading role, but certainly a prominent role on the show. Always plays a good bad guy.
Yeah.
I mean, his facial expressions were always the best. Even when he played the Klingon, he had just his, just so much expression in his face, and he's great. But there were some other people that that we take. If you want a sort of Star Trek connection, is Ed Begley Jr. of course, was one of the Viper pilots.
Yep.
Who eventually ended up in a Voyager episode. My most hated Voyager episode.
Yeah, maybe tell me about that.
Yeah. And one of the other guys, I forgot his name. Let me look it up. Was on Magnum PI.
Rick.
Played Rick.
Rick, yeah, Larry Manetti.
Larry Manetti.
Yep.
Larry Manetti played Rick. Was also one of the Viper pilots. So there's just these people. Again, you keep seeing the same people over and over again. And again, these were all, I might add, they're all Larson shows.
Right. And they were all...
Went to the well saying, I liked working with this guy, I liked working with this person, we're going to put him back in something else.
Yeah, there was a resurgence. And when you were under contract with the studio, it was you go on to the next job or go on to the next job. Universal, they were pretty...
That was probably a pretty good gig as an actor if you could become a studio contract worker, so to speak. You're almost guaranteed a certain amount of work.
Right.
Because he had a lot to do with $6 Million Man, Glenn Larson, and of course he did Buck Rogers subsequently, which clearly he used the same method. Because remember when they came out with the film for Battlestar was in Sense-Around.
Oh yeah.
Which basically means we got subwoofers.
Yep. Well, that was a big thing when you had Earthquake and you had Inferno.
Yeah.
All those movies.
Irwin Allen era of disaster movies. Because you remember they're very popular in the 70s. We had a lot of Poseidon Adventure.
Yep.
Towering Inferno, which was really popular at the time. Those Irwin Allen disaster. That's how he got his Master of Disaster kind of once he got away from doing.
Because he was just basically doing the television series. I mean, he did like 4 series in the 1960s, and he went right through them, and then he switched over to film. But the interesting thing is that Irwin Allen actually had started in film, and he had started in the late 50s with that. So it was like he made the transition from film to TV for over a decade, and doing, you know, the movies, and which he became the king of those, you know, specific types of disaster movies. And then things started to wane down. But that's, you know, the changing of the times, and, you know, the decade, and things, you know, basically evolving. Oh, there's my first basically for the night, folks. I just did it. But yeah, so it really, and I was talking about this on Friday night, how each decade almost has its signature stamp, you know, to it, whether it be the tone or the way, you know, things were filmed. I mean, I know you were involved in, you know, television, so even with that, you know, you could even, you know, elaborate about that, how, you know, certain angles and certain things were done. And as each decade progresses, you know, new techniques are, you know, evolve, and things definitely change, and there's a different way of doing things. But to me, if you go back and you watch these shows from those different types of periods, each show has their timestamp on it, which is really kind of cool.
They had a formula, no question about it. I think we see less of that today. I think we see more producers, directors breaking out of what they consider what we consider a normal format for filming in different angles. Certainly, Battlestar from the 2004 definitely went in a completely new direction. The way they shot their space battle scenes was really had never been done, and really not too many people have done it since like that. As I think Doug Drexler put it to me, he's like, the camera doesn't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. That's
the way they kind of, he explained it to me, like, that's the way they do it, is like, you know, the camera's kind of looking at this, and then something else happens to the side, and it goes, you know, shoots over there, and it kind of zooms in and zooms out, kind of a lot of that. Some people really didn't care for that. They liked it laid out, you know, the old style way where here's what's happening.
Right.
You know, and there's something to be said for that. You know, if you watch the old car chases from the 60s and 70s films, and you watch stuff that we see today, they don't look at all alike, you know.
No, they don't.
The famous one, Bullet, you know, when you kind of watch it today, you're like, it's not very exciting.
No, not yeah. It's totally, it's totally different. It has a different, you know, atmosphere to it. Hey, I'm just jumping on with some online comments. Hey, Deb Jacoby is joining us. Thanks, Deb, for joining us. And she's saying that John Colicos was also Mykos Cassadine on General Hospital. I did not know that he actually did soap opera.
I didn't know he did that, but it doesn't surprise me.
No, I mean, he was very, you know, diverse in what he did, and he always made a good bad guy, a good heavy, especially in the episodic television of the 60s and the 70s. And,
right, yeah. So, I did want to say, we were talking about uniforms, and I was getting to my insignia thing, and a lot of people,
That's
I don't
really
know
cool.
if this is a trivia thing or who knows what this actually is. It's a real thing. This is what they wore on their lapels. There's a real insignia for something. Who knows what it is? I'll give you a hint. In Battlestar, they flipped it 180 degrees from what it is. Really is used. So we'll keep talking, and then
we'll go back. We're on a delay for about 20 seconds.
Don't Google.
No Googling. No Googling. Michelle's commenting. She said about yes, and he was John Delancey. So was John Delancey on Days of Our Lives. Yeah, and there's the Star Trek reference. Eugene.
I know that John Delancey had done some soap opera stuff.
Michelle, I do remember that his character's name was Eugene, and he just seemed very simple. But I think he actually turned out to be like a murderer on that show too, if I remember correctly.
He's a great. Not to get off topic, but he is such a great. John is a very good actor. You saw him in Breaking Bad, and of course as Q.
Yes.
He's
a very diverse actor, and I'll kind of sideline with a quick story. I was at a Star Trek convention, folks. Go figure. It was in 1988, and I was actually there with my friend Vince. We were up in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and Denise Crosby, I believe, or Grace Lee Whitney was supposed to be there. And then what happened was John Delancey was there as a replacement guest. And he was there, was great with the fans. And I remember asking, everybody was asking him like Q type questions, and what would Q do for this, or what happened on the set. And I asked him how he got involved in acting, and he spoke about it for a good 6 or 7 minutes. And it was kind of cool, because it was kind of a question that was kind of like away from the norm. And I always found it very interesting to see actors or knowing about actors as far as what they did prior to what, made them famous. He was actually talking about coming back from filming Mission Impossible, which was being shot in 1988, the new Mission Impossible series. And he just had came back from Australia from filming that, which was kind of cool. Sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to cut.
No, I mean, there's definitely some breakup here, so I don't want to be talking and you're still talking.
Yeah, we're on delay here.
But I have a really good John Delancey story too, but I won't go into it since we're not talking about TNG or anything.
I know we kind of did this.
So anyway, did anybody get the trivia question there? Or?
I have not seen an answer on regards to that. Maybe, well, go ahead and give it away here.
The answer is that this is the U.S. Army military intelligence insignia. So that's what they use now. As I was telling you earlier, they cannot reproduce these. Only the companies that the government has said that can make these pins can make so you won't see a cheap knockoff of it by a Novus or something. Not that you'd ever get it from a Novus, but it's a little dig on a Novus there. But anyway, but you can buy these. You can go online and buy them at military, pin places. It's not like they're hard to find. It's just that they have to be they're actually the actual ones that the military are using. So.
No, which is really cool. I mean, that's like the real McCoy, no pun intended with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about episodes of Galactica, and there was two episodes that were not I was not really I would consider favorites. One of them was the Magnificent Warriors, and that was one that guest starred Brett Summers, and they were looking for a part because of their hydroponic garden essentially was having problems, and and Sue just said that Dave Bulcher got the answer. Dave, I apologize. I didn't see your comment, so thanks for answering the trivia, and good job. I had a feeling you would get that too. But getting back to Magnificent Warriors, that one was with Brett Summers. Anybody out? What's that?
I'm trying to remember Magnificent Warriors. It's not ringing an exact bell in my head.
The woman had a previous relationship with Adama, and he was a little bit nervous about having her come on the mission, but she had the Energizer.
Somebody, they're always like Cyrus, somebody.
Yes, she was a Cyrus. Yes. And Brett Summers was remembered for Match Game, if anybody remembers that show from the 70s.
I remember that show. She
used to sit next to Charles Nelson Riley in the upper tier, so and she was married to Jack Klugman, but that was one of mine that I wasn't so fond. One was, and you and I were talking about this too, the Young Lords, and that had Audrey Landers in it. I mean, is a 12.
You broke up there on me, but I know which one you're going to say.
Yeah, the Young Lords with Audrey Landers. I mean, as a 12-year-old, I was kind of like.
My particular disdain for that episode. Not only was it just a bad episode, I have a personal disdain for Audrey Landers since I had worked with her and her family years ago, and it was not a pleasant experience. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That's But now on a positive note, episodes that we were talking about that we really liked is, if anybody remembers, Lloyd Bridges.
Oh, you froze on me.
Lloyd Bridges being the legendary Commander Kane in The Living Legend, Part 1 and Part 2.
Those two episodes were definitely my favorites. No question about it. It was the most exciting. We have another Battlestar. We have a whole new group of characters to introduce, but there's the one, like I said, the one scene where you've got Baltar in his little flight helmet there, which is hysterical. Sir, you might want to, the silence going, you might want to know is the other Battlestar. What other Battlestar?
He's like,
here comes the Pegasus, coming up behind him, and it was a great moment.
It was a great moment. He's like, turn, you fool, turn. He's coming right for us. And then the screen, it goes to a freeze frame. And it's like, you have to wait until next week until it comes back on.
Yeah.
And that was such an intense moment because it was like, how cool is it? There's another Battlestar out there. That was really, really cool.
Yep. And then, of course, he goes out in a blaze of glory. We don't know what happened. Did he make it? Or did he get destroyed?
Which leads
in...
Right, and that leads into another episode, which is a favorite, which was War of the Gods, Part 1 and Part 2, because Apollo Starbuck and Sheba find a ship on the planet, and when they find the ship, they even make the comment that whatever hit this must have been as big as a Battlestar. And there's been a lot of controversy. There was a lot of controversy back then, and there's been up until maybe this point, and I'm sure the hardcore diehard fans out there know where I'm going with this. The whole thing was, whatever happened to the Pegasus, and was that the Pegasus? And what was your feeling about that, Mike?
At the time, I didn't even, as a kid, I wasn't one of those kids that, like, dug down into this stuff and started really analyzing it. Didn't start doing that till but, so at the time, I just took it for what it was, that is somebody, and I just assumed it was the god, the big, that it was just some ship, that it wasn't I never considered it, I don't think at the time, that it was the Pegasus. Or that it was just some other vessel that got taken out, and we assumed it was by Count Ibley, that did it somehow.
Right. It's interesting. So, it's interesting, Mike, because what happened was in free time you do a lot of digging and you go onto different websites and what have you, and I actually found, I believe Anne Lockhart, or one of the actresses, and I think it was Anne Lockhart, was interviewed in regards to this and discussed this, and supposedly it was not her father that was in that ship, because towards the end of that, when he's trying to stop Sheba from going in there to see what's in there, and it was almost like a setup. Was it was it Commander Kane or not? But there is an image or an outtake, and I guess it's almost like a deleted scene or an image of the being that was in there, and it was one of the race that was of Count Ibley, and it looked like almost like the devil. That's what I think. I always had assumed it was just his people, or somebody that he once had also talked into believing in him, like he was trying to do with the Battlestar or the Galactica people. Saying that I'm your savior, and it was just another race that was. And you and I were talking about this, so to speak. Right.
And of course, we all know that he was also the guy that did the voiceover, and he was also the supreme commander in the first episode.
The Imperious leader.
And everybody does know who played Lucifer, right?
Yeah, that's a big question out there. Who knows the answer to that?
Come on, that's so obvious. I mean, the voice is a dead giveaway. If you watch it, you'll get it in a second. I don't even think, maybe as a kid I picked it up.
I actually did know that as a kid, and I thought it was. I thought that was kind of cool.
I did. I think I recognized the voice, but it didn't put two and two together until I was adult. And I'm like, oh my god, it's.
Oh yeah, I'm not seeing comments coming through here.
Who that is? I would assume they know. I mean, it's not a secret.
No. But in case anybody's wondering, or if they're not sure, it was Jonathan Harris who played Dr. Zachary Smith on Lost in Space, and he was the voice of Lucifer.
Oh,
the pain.
Yeah. So, then I guess my next favorite episode, just kind of jumping back on that, was probably The Hand of God, only because I really love the end when he's up in the observation bubble and he leaves, and then we see the Apollo 11 spacecraft.
Yep.
That just kind of staticky thing, and that was how the series ended.
Yeah, that was the last episode.
And then you think, because to me, and if you had to end the series without any kind of final episode, that was a good one to have, because it kind of, you're on the right track. You're
right.
If you're picking up Apollo 11's signal, you're probably getting in the right direction to go to Earth.
Exactly.
So
it was leading.
Kind of like, okay, so they're on the right track.
And what was interesting too, I was kind of favored because that was, like you were saying, the Apollo 11, and that actually took place on my birthday, so I was always kind of partial to that, because the first moon landing was on July 20th of 1969. I mean, I was born in '66, so it was 3 years earlier. But I always thought that was so cool, especially with my fascination with space and what have you. Oh, you know what? Diane actually hey Diane, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. And she had answered Dr. Smith, so Diane. I'm just seeing it in the notes here, but yeah, that was kind of cool, because
so again, you see a lot of actors that were on that show that we come and see on other stuff, and like I said, we had the guys from different episodes, and Big Lee certainly was around, is still around. So it's interesting that people were on this show and their careers survived. Of course, Richard Hatch, did some stuff, and of course, he did, worked on with the New Voyages folks in Thai, and did stuff. And he was in the 2004 reboot, which was really nice to see that they brought in somebody
right
from the original show. He doesn't play anywhere near the same character, but he is a good actor in his own right, and it was quite a loss for everybody when he passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, I can't believe he's been gone 3 years.
I still have to meet Dirk Benedict. He's always gonna be Starbuck to me.
Yep. And
even though he went on to do. You just mentioned it. What the heck was it?
Oh, the A-Team. He was Faceman. And it's funny with Dirk Benedict. The first movie I actually saw him in was a 1973 film that was on TV, and it was called. Anybody remember that movie out there?
Yes.
And
movie day.
Strother Martin played the ultimate bad guy, and he literally turns him into a snake. And Heather Menzies actually was a part of that show as well too, and she played his girlfriend. But that was the first time I had actually seen Benedict in that show. Hey Vicky, how you doing? Vicky's out there, my friend Vicky. How you doing, Vicky? Oh, and she's saying yes, like she's answering these science fiction questions when I know she's not a science fiction. But yes, Richard Hatch, though, he actually had done a Space 1990. He was at a Space 1999 convention. It was Main Mission 2000 in New York City, and what happened was with that convention, they actually had the Space 1999 being honored, as well as Battlestar Galactica. So it was kind of a combination, and he was one of the guests there, and really nice guy, and it was great with the fans. And he actually had shown his movie that it was almost like a trailer. It was a 4-minute promotional trailer that he was trying to promote, and he was trying to get Battlestar Galactica back into, as a series. And this is way before the Sci-Fi Channel had picked it up and everything. And if you ever have an opportunity to see it, I believe it's out there on YouTube. And he really did a really great job. I mean, he put a lot of production. The production values were incredible, and he just really was on his mark with that. So if you have the opportunity to see it, definitely check it out.
Yeah. Just kind of jumping back to the show, things were just popping in my head, so it's like random thought. But I was thinking, one of the things that they never really clarified, that they had these 12 colonies. Were they 12 separate star systems, or was it 12 planets?
I always took it that it was 12 colonies. 12.
Were they just going? They said 12 colonies, so it would, but then they would make reference to that when Adama makes a reference in one of the early episodes about when they're deciding to go to Earth, that it's another galaxy.
Right.
It's like they're in another galaxy, and I'm like, well, you're talking. Of course, the kid, you don't pick up any of that
stuff. Sure.
And they do briefly talk about light speed, but for the most part, they don't really talk about how fast they're jumping or anything like that. I mean, it's not important to the show.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that even in today watching and thinking, oh, how the hell are they traversing all these? It doesn't matter. And
they really don't even bring that up on as far as.
I just think it's interesting, that even in Star Wars we talk about light speed and stuff like that. Of course, Star Trek we talk about warp drive.
Right.
But they didn't really talk about how they were moving, how fast or how far they were going at any given time.
No, they didn't. And I think there was only maybe 1 or 2 episodes where actually they brought up where the Galactica went to light speed, and I think it was in one of the latter episodes where they were dealing with terror. It was Experiment in Terror. That was one of the things we really didn't cover with Battlestar Galactica. I mean, it was all about the humans and the Cylons and escaping the oppression of the Cylons. As the show continued and it got deeper into the episodes, they seemed to break away from that for a handful of episodes where it was almost like they were giving it a break, and they were, enclosing upon Earth. I remember there was a 2-hour special that was called Greetings from Earth. If anybody remembers Randolph Mantooth from his days on the television series Emergency, he played a character, Johnny Gage, and he was one of the 2 paramedics. And an episode with Nancy Harmon, who was... Or Kelly Harmon, I believe. I'm sorry, I'm saying Nancy. She was actually the Tic Tac girl, if any commercials in the 70s and the 80s. Mark Harmon's sister, and they did that. They found these people that were frozen in suspended animation, and they were wondering and thinking perhaps they were from Earth. And what they do is they follow them to their destination to find out that but that they're being oppressed
right.
by an alliance, which, I mean, it had its overtones as far as what they seem to be implying. And then what happens is they're able to, rescue them, and they bring the bad guys, the Eastern Alliance members, back to the Galactica. And I remember that last scene in the episode where, they, and in fact it was Lloyd Bachner, who was another Universal actor, and he's, looking at it, he says, he sees the Galactica. God, what is that? And
right, it's huge compared to what they have, and
exactly.
That was another getting into models. The Eastern Alliance ship, that was a kit bashed. You can actually, if you know models, you can look at every part of that thing and tell you what it was originally from, what model airplane or whatever. I remember seeing something about that on one of the documentaries that it was totally kit bashed. But the shuttle that they picked up them and that's another model that got reused. I want to say that eventually became Buck Rogers' shuttle.
You know what? I think you're right. Absolutely. Yep.
Got frozen in time. What was it called? Ranger 3.
Ranger 3.
Was the Buck Rogers.
Yep.
Ranger 3. Yeah. So I think again they would reuse stuff a lot. Again it was all Larson stuff. So he's like, I'm not going to build another model, just repaint it.
No, exactly. And then the other thing too is, we were talking about this in conversation, when they were doing the special effects. I mean, after a while, when you would watch the special effects sequences over and over again of them, of the fights going on and the Vipers fighting the Cylons, you would almost become to aware that it's going to be a certain scene where it's going to the right of the camera, or it's going to the left of the camera. It was very similar, or how they were doing the strafing runs and on the Galactica and the destroying the one before it gets to it. You almost memorize the pattern, because I mean, it was a very sophisticated special effect, because, again, we have to remember, this was 1978, so they were using models. This wasn't CGI. This is a time, before all that was available. So they were very limited in what they can do and produce. I mean, it was incredible, but still, after a while of watching, 22 episodes or so, it becomes very familiar after a while. So it was almost like a resurgence. I mean, Irwin Allen used to be considered the king of, what we used to call and deem as stock footage. And then, this was another example of that.
Yeah, they did a lot of it. Buck Rogers was the same way. If you watched any of their fight scenes, it was kind of usually the same sequences that they would use. The hatchet fighters for the Draconians.
Yes.
It would always be the same kind of Immelmans, and you'd see it over and over and over again. They would just, intermix them. But, again, it's expected at this point, because it's, it's the cost. It's too expensive to create. Nowadays they'd never get away with it.
No, they wouldn't. There's no way.
Yeah, that's that's bullshit. Back then, and you talked about when on your other, I was saying, I made the comment on, audiences had less choice in those days. You had the 3 networks. That was pretty much it.
Yeah, it was CBS, NBC.
Yeah, NBC, CBS, and ABC.
That was it.
Like I was telling you earlier, I only got to watch what my dad would allow us to watch, because we had one television.
Right.
The one color TV, the console, big Zenith 25-inch console TV. And I'll make a note, my dad still has the console for the console TV.
Wow.
the TV, this is my dad, doesn't... The TV, remember, they were like furniture, those televisions.
Yes, they were.
They were like furniture. So the TV had long since gone bad, because it was all... And then those days, the whole chassis would come out as a unit.
Yep.
You could literally pull the entire television out of that as one big giant thing by itself. The cabinet was just that. It was just a cabinet. So he took that to the dump, got rid of it, and he took it and he turned that console into a printer stand for his office at home. And it's...
Ow.
That Zenith television console is still a printer stand in my father's office.
Mike, it's funny you're saying that, because I think I was talking about this on the last episode that we did, and I remember my parents got a Zenith inch chroma color television, and I think it was back in 73, 74, it was around that time frame, and we had never had a color TV up until that point. I think it was like 6 or 7 years old. And I remember too, my mom always saying, don't get too close because the big fear was the radiation, from the TV screen that was, and the eyes and everything. So you had to be really careful. You had to stay back from the TV. And now we have cell phones that we're watching all the time. And
X-rays. The X-rays coming out of those old two TVs were actually a real thing.
Yeah.
There was X-rays, and it really wasn't good. Of course, I worked in television production for years. I worked in mass control. And I joked that I'm going to die anyway because I had like 3 walls of monitors hitting me from 4 different, directions all day, 8 hours a day. So, I mean, if I haven't died from that, you probably weren't going to die from the. But the old color TVs especially did put out quite a bit of X-rays compared to the newer ones once they got into the 80s and 90s. But when we got to Buck Rogers, which was maybe a year, my sister had a little black and white TV that she finally gave me, one of those little 12-inch black and white rabbit ear.
Oh, yeah.
And I was, because we had a big aerial on the roof, so we could pick up all the New York stations. We lived near New Haven, Connecticut, so we could pick up most of the New York stations on a big aerial. But on that, I remember trying to watch it was not on my dad's playlist, so to speak. So I'm trying to watch it on an antenna, with the tin foil, and it would come in all snowy, and I watch it, and what you did to watch these shows was what I did to watch these shows.
I know, because we were limited on what we had. I mean, the stations we had exactly. Channel 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13 was PBS. So 13 really didn't count.
Because we lived near a big city. Up all those people that live up here where I live, like up in New Hampshire, they had like maybe 2.
Wow.
PBS and maybe one other state.
Wow, that's crazy.
Because of the mountains and
Yep.
wasn't, if you're lucky, you might pick something out of Boston.
Yep. Rob Barnes.
We were lucky.
Rob is saying WPIX. Yeah, Rob, that's what I grew up on. That's 11. Channel 11, 11 Alive. Yeah, that's where I watched Space 19.
They ran, I think, Star Trek and I think did they also run Lost in Space, or was
no? Lost in Space was run on WNEW TV, Channel 5 out of New York, and Channel 11 ran Star Trek. I remember
Channel 9. That was
WOR TV, and that was out of New York City. But then what they did was they went to Secaucus, New Jersey. They had switched over. But it's crazy because Channel 9 used to run a television series called UFO for Space 1999 fans out there. I remember watching that like in the early, probably like 74, 75. But we'll talk about that another time too. But
UFO was a good show.
Yeah, loved it. And then then you had Star Trek, which was on at 6 o'clock, and then you had Space 1999 on at 7 on the weekends. And then 11 would run Star Trek at night, at like 6 o'clock also. I mean, it was like after school.
It was like almost indoctrination. It was inevitable that we were going to, since all we had to watch was that stuff. So,
it's so true.
Inevitably we were going to be hooked on old science fiction TV. Before I know it's getting late, but I wanted to show my board game.
Oh, yes.
I still have.
Look at that prop. Wow.
It's intact. I have all the pieces, parts to it.
Mike, that's in great condition. Look at that.
I don't think it's worth anything, really, but, anybody who wants to play, let me know. I also have, those that are Battlestar fans, you probably already know, but, Eagle Moss is making some really great models, because I am not a model builder, I'm a model buyer. So I buy all my models. I don't know if you want to see them, but I got, you can go on Eagle Moss and purchase them. They even have like a subscription. They'll send you one every month or something like that.
No, that's really cool, Mike.
They're really great models.
They
are nice.
You have a nice collection back there. The only thing I have, and it's funny, I was going through stuff yesterday, and I've got Battlestar Galactica soundtrack that I came across, and this is celebrating the 25th anniversary. So now Galactica is.
That's cool. I wish I had that.
42 years.
I didn't know that existed, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool to find that. That was a nice find. I have some other tidbits as far as trivia. I thought we could ask some of the fans out there. Does anybody know what the coins were called that were used on Battlestar Galactica as far as currency? Trivia question. What were the coins called? And then while you're thinking of that, what was the famous card game that Starbuck used to play? Anybody remember that card game? And the other thing I'm going to ask.
What was the? I don't know. Maybe you asked it because you're breaking up. There was a ball game that they played.
Yes.
Well,
what was the name of the ball game?
Really horrible game uniforms that they used to wear that were just...
Oh, Rob Barnes got it. He got Cubits, and then...
Cubits.
Very good. And then so did Warren. Warren got it. Paul got it. Good job, everyone. That's right for that. And let's see. Does anybody remember? Yep, Pyramid. Warren, Rob. Yep, they got that. Very good. Good job, guys. What about the game? Does anybody remember the game that used to be played? Good job, Steve. I see that you got the answer too. I want to make sure we acknowledge everybody here. Yes, Scott Johnson. Hey, Scott, how you doing out there? Good to see you there. Triad. Triad was the game. In fact, there was that game was played. It was played in Lost Planet of the Gods Part 1 and Part 2, and I guess Starbuck and Apollo's team were pretty much always winning. What happened was Count Ibley, played by the late Patrick McNee, who was, we were talking about earlier, who did the voice of the Imperious leader and the narrator. He actually kind of used magic so that they wouldn't win the game. But there was also another episode that was designated that was important with that, and that's where Apollo was almost being put on, accused on trial, and it was called Murder on the Rising Star. Now, my trivia question that I'm going to ask is, the guy he actually was accused of killing was in another science fiction television show, and his name was on the show was Ortega. That was the character's name, but the actor also portrayed a character in another famous science fiction show. Does anybody know who I'm talking about or what show that is? And we'll give you a couple of maybe 20 or 30 seconds in regards to that. Hi, Marianne. Thanks for joining us. Also, Kelly, I wanted to say hi, Kelly.
On that one, Roy. I don't know that one.
Frank Ashmore, believe it or not, he was the actor, and he was in V. He had a recurring role on the television, the science fiction show V, which I thought was kind of cool. So there was that. And now I've been kind of holding off on Trek, so I've been that. But I am going to put another question out there about Trek. Does anybody know, in the episode, it was called Take the Celestra. Does anybody know what actor from Star Trek history in that show? And I'll give you a hint. The character's name was Kronos, and he was the commander of the Celestra. Does anybody remember that? I'll give everybody a couple seconds. And I'll give you another hint.
That one too. I even had some stuff in front of me and I don't.
I'll give you another hint too. He actually had done a lot of. He was a recurring character on The Rifleman.
Oh, jeez, that doesn't help me at all.
It was Paul Fix. It was Paul Fix, and he had played the Doctor in the second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, of classic Star Trek. So anyway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, that was a good one. I wouldn't have got that one.
Yeah. I didn't see any.
It was funny. Like Fred Astaire was on Battlestar Galactica, which is hysterical.
Yeah, he was Starbuck's father.
Supposedly, well, didn't it turn out it really wasn't his father or something? I think after all.
No, it turned out
really was.
He really was, but he didn't want. He told Cassiopeia to make sure not to tell Starbuck, because if Starbuck found out, he was going to give up, his service, and he wasn't going to stay with Cassiopeia. And he said that's why, because she said that
I remember now. Yeah, I do remember.
The test was positive.
Of all the oddball people to see on a science fiction show, is Fred Astaire dancing on the particular episode. I mean, he played the character fine. I mean, nothing against Fred Astaire. It was just kind of weird seeing him on a science fiction show.
Yeah,
it's not where you put. He's not where you put him, but
exactly. In regards to it was Dr. Piper in Star Trek. That was Paul Fix's character, and he also played in Scott's Right too. He was Micah, and that was the recurring character on The Rifleman. But yeah, a lot of history out there.
Good job, ScoJo. The font of knowledge there.
Yep, good job.
But what else can we do? It's after 8 o'clock.
Yeah, we're kind of like we wrapping.
I don't care.
Yeah,
I got nothing to do.
So I just have to ask, what are, out there to the fans that are joining us tonight, what are your favorite highlights or favorite episodes from Battlestar Galactica? You know what, we'll take 3 because we are at the 1 hour mark just about, and we're going to start wrapping it up. But I'm just curious if you, what was a favorite moment or a favorite Galactica moment that you recall or would like to discuss, and we will just touch upon that. The show was really, groundbreaking for it was. Hey, Eva, my grade school friend and high school friend, Eva Lantos. Hi, Eva. Thanks for joining. Nice to see you out there. And my friend Marianne. Hi, Marianne. Thanks for joining, too. I want to make sure I acknowledge everybody. It's going really quickly through the comments section here. Hey, Scott's saying hi back to you, Rizzo. He's saying, yo, Rizzo. Good seeing you, Scott. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
I'm really bad about that on my show. I hope nobody takes offense because I'm so into the conversation. I really need to do better. You do a good job of that, of keeping track of comments.
Thanks. It's tough because we're having a great conversation and it's great, and then I'm just trying to incorporate that. But yeah, it's all good. But Sue and John are saying Paul Fix was on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Yes, he was. That's very true.
Yeah, again, you see these actors, and again, they would cycle through, and it's just of the era. You saw it in Star Trek. You'd see, there were Star Trek actors that were in a bunch of other stuff, whether they were Desilu Productions or something else. They would just kind of, you just see them in everything.
Exactly.
It's kind of the thing, and so it's of that era where you don't see that as today. You don't see kind of that. Oh, they're in this and this and this. You see big names, but these kind of character actors, you don't really so much circulation. At least I don't notice.
No, no. It's not definitely not like the way it used to be. Oh, Warren's commenting. I love the Orions. I'm saying the Orions. I love the Ovions. They never really had any other weird aliens besides them. That's true. And the Ovions were in the opening episode. They almost looked like bug creatures, and they were like these insects.
I'm glad he brought that up because that was one thing. It's that was really the only. That was the only time we saw alien type things. We had the woman, remember, with four eyes and
yes.
mouths. The singers that Starbuck was trying to sign, which I never got. I'm like, these people are all refugees, and you're trying to sign a musical group to do what? Sing to the refugees that are people that are living in cargo containers?
Yeah, it didn't make much sense.
It was kind of surreal, but that was Starbuck, I guess. But yeah, that was really the only episodes where you saw really weird aliens. That was it. Once you got past that, there weren't any more.
No.
The 2 android guys,
Hector and Vector. Oh, I love Bobby Van. I thought he was great, and then it was Ray Volger was also in that too, I believe.
Volgers, yeah.
Yeah, great entertainers, but those 2 characters, I always felt like when they introduced them into Galactic, I was like, oh, that was painful. But every show has got their moment, and that's that for that. Oh, what?
But really, and the funny thing is, I think when they did the initial, because that was kind of the part of the movie was that whole thing on Carillon with the when we saw this, I think they were looking for that Star Wars cantina kind of feel, where they had some oddball, a few weird alien people in there, but that was the only reference they had. Beyond that, it was human android,
right?
Robot, whatever you want to call it, Cylons. That was it.
No, it's so true. Oh, and somebody also wrote, Steve Belinsky wrote, Rick Springfield getting blown up. Yeah, Zach,
he played Zach,
I meant
his
to
bring
brother.
that one up too earlier. Yeah, Rick Springfield. He was trying to break in. Well, he was an actor, and then he broke into music.
Right.
So, of course, he was another alum from General Hospital.
Yep, he was on General Hospital. He was a recurring on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, you know what? Scott's saying that his Battlestar my Battlestar Galactica moment was watching Richard Hatch receive his Battlestar jacket made by James Cawley while on the set tour, or at the shooting. So yeah, I missed that too. I met
him. It was before my time, so I never got to meet him, but I would have liked to.
Yeah,
he looked like he was a pretty nice guy.
Like I said, I was fortunate enough to meet at the Space 1999 convention, Main Mission 2000, and then also when we went to Chiller Theater, and he was really just a great guy. In fact, whatchamacallit, I have another trivia question that is related, and you were talking about Jane Seymour and how she was in the James Bond movie. What other actress in Battlestar Galactica was also a Bond. Does anybody know who that is? That's an interesting trivia question, right? It was in a James Bond film, and I will give you a hint. It was from the 1960s. I'm wondering if anybody's going to get that.
What was the year? It broke up right when you started to say the year 19...
Oh, it was a James Bond movie from the 1970s that this actress was in, and she was also she was in Battlestar Galactica. She was in a Battlestar Galactica episode. Nobody's commenting, so I think I may have done a stumper on that.
Yeah, you stumped me on that one. I'm trying to think back. Probably if I watched all the episodes, I would probably catch it, but nothing's popping in my head. I'm trying to think.
Deb Jacoby, hey Deb. Deb is saying Barbara Bach. Excellent guess, Deb, but that was not her. Also, let's see. Warren got it. Britt Eklund. Very good. Yes.
Oh, yeah. She was in Ice Station Zero.
She was.
The ice cannon or whatever the heck. What
yep.
was the name of that?
Yeah, it was called the gun on Ice Planet Zero.
Right. Everybody was a clone.
Yep.
They were all the same. Yeah.
Yep.
That's right. It was Britt Eklund. From what movie? Man with the Golden Gun.
Man with the Golden Gun. That's right. Yep. Yeah, good guess. Eva tried to guess too, and Scott tried to guess.
Star Wars alum there.
Yeah.
Star Wars alum in that movie because we had what's his name? Was the Man with the Golden Gun?
Oh, it was Christopher Lee.
Terrible.
Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
He was also in a Space 1999 episode entitled Earthbound, and he played Captain Xandor. And I actually had read that he actually got that part because The Man with the Golden Gun came out in 1974, and they were filming Space 1999 in 1974. It premiered in 75. So it was being shot at Pinewood Studios, and that's when he was approached about being in the Space 1999 episode. So I thought that was really cool. And as you indicated, he was also...
That was one of those weird, kind of ended on a creepy, chilling note.
Yeah.
Because the guy was stuck on the thing, and he was awake, and he was going to pretty much die alone.
Yeah, that was... He was...
Like that Passengers movie.
Commissioner Simmons was the Dr. Smith of Space 1999, but the only difference was Commissioner Simmons got... And that was the end of him. And yes, Steve is also commenting about Marin was on Fantasy Island, too. Yeah, because he played his assistant.
Again, of that era, you're going to see a lot of those actors just kind of... Especially... Well, Fantasy Island, I mean, between The Love Boat and Fantasy Island, I think covered just about every actor that was popular of the 1970s.
Right. Well, Tattoo was Hervé Villachez was his assistant.
Hervé Villachez was also in Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah,
right?
that was his assistant. So,
Big Nash.
So anyway, well, we're going to start to wrap things up. Mike, I just want to say thank you so much for being my guest co-host tonight. I really appreciate.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate your friendship, and I'm just really happy that we got to know each other and become through the Star Trek set tour. It's just really cool. So again, just it's just a way that being able to share science fiction fans and doing things like this and coming together is just really awesome. So again, I want you to give a moment when you're going to be on next this coming Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday 7:00. Sci-Fi Distilled. We're on a Facebook page, so you can go there and like it. And we're doing the classic Fifth Element. This is going to be a really good one. We got Ken Schmidt as our guest, who has a whole presentation that he did for Trek Ticonderoga for Fifth Element. But that was such a fun movie. I considered a lightning in a bottle type movie, almost a perfect movie. So we're going to have a lot of fun talking about the Fifth Element. That's
going to be awesome. So we'll definitely tune in for that. So anyway, everyone else, please stay safe. I hope you enjoyed our episode number 6 of remembering science fiction television shows of the 1960s and 1970s and going over Battlestar Galactica. We will be back next Friday and for episode 7, and this will be announced probably in the next 2 days of what we'll be covering. I just want to say, everybody, please stay safe out there. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and it's just social distance for right now. Just stay safe and just be aware of your surroundings. And I really believe we will get through this, but we just have to work together. It's all about, unity and just, coming together and not being apart. It's just, that's really what it's about. So for now, I just want to say thank you and live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.